Good morning, YouTube, and welcome to the Reptile Barn. Today I am doing a video prompted by something I saw on the MorphMarket community. So, something I've noticed for a long time in the reptile community, and really pretty much anything to do with live animals, is that when people disagree on anything to do with their reptiles or their animals, they immediately jump to morality or ethics to kind of tear down their opponent, right? So I'm going to talk about the ethics of reptile keeping, reptile breeding, and it probably would apply to other animals too, but since we do reptiles, that's what I'm going to talk about. By the way, this is Fat Sally, a big old Mojave girl. She's just gonna chill with me as I do this video. So yeah, I want to go into 5 or 6 different topics that people sometimes argue about the ethics of those practices and just give my opinion on them. And I'll try and be quick because I know that's a lot to cover. The very first thing is live feeding. It's funny because a lot of people in the reptile world don't like it and they say it's wrong to do that, and they kind of make this implication that it's morally wrong, it's ethically wrong to do that because of the danger to your snake, to your reptile, right? Whereas a lot of people out in the world would say that's unethical because of the pain and suffering of the rodent, right, or the feeder animal. Either way, let me talk about this. Assuming that you're working with a carnivore and omnivore, an animal that must eat some animal matter, right? Like a snake, for example. This snake is going to eat rodents its entire life, okay? So the rodent is going to be killed, no matter what, all right? A constrictor like this, for example, assuming it's an appropriately sized rodent, that rodent is going to have blood flow cut off to the brain in less than 10 seconds, sometimes less than 5 seconds. It is, weirdly enough, even though it seems terrifying and horrible to be strangled to death by a giant snake, it's a very ethical way to go, right? I do not believe that it is less horrible to go in a gas chamber and be choked out while you and a million other rats are peeing yourselves in terror. I don't think that's any better or more ethical than being constricted. I just don't. And if I had to choose, I'd probably choose to get choked out. I really would. Anyway, but that's just looking from the rodent's perspective. From the animal that you are feeding, from their perspective, the thing I always tell people is that probably, honestly, it's healthier as far as exercise goes and mental stimulation for your snake to eat live, okay? However, there is a danger posed if you do not watch the entire time. If you cannot sit and watch, you should not feed live, period. So I don't put a blanket statement out that feeding is dangerous if it's live. I don't think it is if you're willing to just sit there and watch. But if you can't for whatever reason, or you don't want to, you must feed frozen thawed. I don't think that there is any excuse for throwing a live mouse or a live rat in with your snake and walking away. Don't do that. To me, that is putting your animal in more danger than it ever needs to be, and that could be an ethics issue. But I also don't want to just say it's wrong to feed live. We feed live to some of our animals, but I watch. And if the snake isn't hungry, I take out the rodent. I never give it alone time where the rodent could get scared or hungry or curious and start chewing on my snake, okay? Never, never, never. Not going to ever do it. So there's live feeding, my perspective, okay? I know that some people are going to be mad that I'm in favor of some live feedings, even conditionally, but I don't care. That's how I feel about it, and that's how I'm going to stay. The MorphMarket community thread that I read that kind of sparked this whole thing for me was talking about breeding female ball pythons specifically, okay? People had wildly different opinions on this. A lot of the old timers chimed in and were like, look, back in the day, the rule of thumb was 1,000 to 1,200 grams a female's good to go. And then it kind of, over the years, people started saying 1,500 grams, and that's what I mostly hear. I am now also hearing quite a few people saying 1,800 grams, okay? So that's one way to look at it, is to just pick a weight that you think is the right weight for a snake. It's extremely arbitrary, and I don't know of a single scientific study that has been peer-reviewed and published in a journal about the proper breeding weight for ball pythons. So to me, take those numbers, throw them out, they're complete trash. Total garbage. Experienced breeders will look at the body type of their female. If she still looks like a teenager, the long and slender, more like the males look, even if she's hit 1,500 grams, I might not breed her. But if she is only 1,200 grams and she's begun to take on that plump look, if she's giving you signs of follicle growth, like she feels reproductively ready, I would breed her happily. I really would, at 1,200 grams. In fact, a couple times I've done it, and we've had no issues at all. I read an article from Justin Kabilka a long time ago where he talked about this, and he was just like, look, if your female's 1,200 grams and she's eating like a pig and you start breeding her, if she's going to go that year, she's going to keep eating like a pig for months. By the time she lays her eggs, she's going to be 1,800 grams. So just picking some arbitrary weight just doesn't make sense. But for somebody who's not experienced and doesn't really have an eye for it yet, or they don't have an ultrasound and they're not exactly sure what behaviors they're looking for follicle growth, I can see wanting just an easy, concrete number. Weigh my snake. Oh, it hasn't hit weight yet, so I'm waiting. I can see wanting that, but it just doesn't work very well. They are drastically different, individual to individual. I've told this to a lot of people. We had a snake for a long time. She laid eggs every single year for us. A lot of them, 10 or 11 or 12 eggs. And she never, ever hit more than 1,500 grams. Ever. She would barely hit 1,500 grams, and then she'd lay her eggs and she'd drop back down to like 1,100 grams or 1,000. And she'd put on weight through the year and she'd lay again the next year and drop back down. She was just a small individual. Whereas this beast right here, she's approaching 5,000 grams. And of course she's going to lay huge clutches for us, no problem, right? But you know what's interesting? She doesn't lay every year. She takes a year off on her own, even though we breed her every year. So I'm going to segue into my next topic that's very related to this. Someone was adamant on this thread that it is so unethical to breed your females in consecutive years. I don't agree. I really don't. Now, I want to be careful because I think there are some animals where this is the case. You don't want to overbreed them. But with an animal like a ball python that is only going to lay at most once per year, and biologically, and we've seen this in captivity for decades, so I don't think that this is a stretch for me to say, if the female does not feel ready, she's going to take the year off no matter what you do. You can pack food into her, you can put a male in, and she's been locked up 50 times. And if she doesn't want to go, she's not going to go. So I do not feel that you can overbreed a ball python. People were trying to make claims about how much of their lifespan was being shortened and all of this. Again, without data, without statistics, this is just bogus claims. People, you have to have science if you want to argue with science. You can't just make up science. You have to do it. You have to do the work. And I don't know of hardly anybody doing real data-driven statistical analyses of, I did this practice for my ball python and this was the result. You would need hundreds of ball pythons, first of all. So these people who have 2 snakes and they're telling you you can't breed them back to back because it reduces their lifespan, how do you know that? Seriously, how do you're just guessing. You don't know that. Now, there are animals that have been bred for thousands of years by people that we know if you breed them too close back to back, you're going to have some bad results with their health, with their reproductive abilities. And so, of course, I'm not trying to say this is a case across the board for all animals. But for a ball python, they regulate their own cycle. They will take a year off if they feel like it, and there is not a thing you can do about it. So let them take care of themselves. Don't try and force your weird beliefs that you've just decided to shove onto everybody onto your ball pythons. If you want to give them a year off because you just don't need a clutch from them that year, that's fine. But you know what's going to happen though sometimes? We had a female that did not get bred this last year, and she ovulated anyways. Laid almost an entire clutch of slugs. There was only one fertile egg in there because she hadn't been bred, but she felt like she was ready to go. So there was a little bit of retained sperm from the previous year, and she tried to lay a clutch, and we wasted all those eggs because we didn't breed her. So that really does happen. I'm not going to throw some number at you because I don't have it. I'm not going to make up a number, right? A statistic, but I know that it happens with personal experience. Number 4. And this one, I am much more on the conservative side, where I do think this can get into really thorny ethics. Veterinary care. If you have a large collection of animals of any sort, it doesn't matter how careful you are, how perfect your husbandry is, how perfect your feeding everything is. If you have a lot of animals, there's going to be some sick ones. That's just a rule of life, right? In wild populations, most scientists will say that any given population of wild animals, about 4% of that population is going to be sick at any given time. I believe we can do better than that in captivity, but you can't avoid it entirely. So how does it work with veterinary care? This gets tricky because people start to attach a monetary value to their snake, right? And that's sketchy to me. If you're trying to say, well, I'm only going to get veterinary care for my animal that is worth $2,000 because it's worth that much money to me, I'm not going to give veterinary care to my Mojave here who might only be worth $100. Well, it's still a living, beautiful animal that you are responsible for. And I can tell you from our experience, we have just erred on the side of we will spend the money for any of our reptiles. If we are using them for our reptile farm, our breeding operation, we owe it to them to keep them in perfect health. These are our pets. We name them all to try and keep that attachment. We try and handle every single one of them as much as we can. To me, saying this animal's worth less, so I'm not going to give it the veterinary care, that's unethical. I believe that, and that gets difficult. What if you have 10,000 animals? I don't know. Are you going to let the cheaper ones just suffer and die? Are you going to euthanize them yourself humanely? I don't know what to tell you. But you need to have a strategy. You need to have a savings account specifically for veterinary care because these things come up as an emergency. You can't see it coming necessarily. All of a sudden your snake's nose is bubbling, it has a respiratory infection. You can't wait 2 weeks for your next paycheck. The snake needs veterinary care today. So that to me, that's an ethical issue. We shouldn't be so cold and calculating about these animals, in my opinion. Again, 5th, I want to talk a little bit about breeding snakes with neurological issues, conditions that might affect their quality of life. Okay, so what we have decided here at the Reptile Barn is if it is a neurological issue that we believe reduces their quality of life, if it causes them pain, or if it makes it so they cannot normally perform a basic biological function, if they can't eat properly, shed properly, breathe properly, defecate properly, any of these bodily functions, then it's not okay. If they're in pain, if they're afraid all the time because of some issue, this is a problem. So unfortunately, there's some beautiful mutations that also increase the risk of spinal kinks. To me, that has a potential for pain, for difficulty swallowing, pooping, whatever. We just don't go there. And it's a shame because there's some real beautiful ones, but to me, that's an ethical issue. Most of the morphs that have a wobble, we have decided that we do not believe that's causing them any pain. They eat properly, they shed properly, they don't seem afraid, they seem like a happy, healthy snake that just has a wobble. And, you know, we're hated for this by some people, and that's okay. That's their opinion, but the spider morph is the famous one, but there's a lot. So, anyway, that's my take on that. So the last thing I want to talk about and focus on a little bit to end this video is hybridization. So hybridization is the idea that you would take animals of maybe the same species but they're different subspecies, or maybe they're the same genus but they're different species, and you'd breed them together, right? The offspring would be a hybrid. And there is a loud contingent of animal people, including in the reptile world, who absolutely hate this. They think that you are just monsters if you breed hybrids, okay? On purpose. And there's a lot that goes into this. So I'm going to be as respectful as I can. First off, we need to get it through our heads that the modern concept of speciation, as we normally talk about it, in kind of a black and white sections, right, where we've completely identified this is a species, then there's a gap, and this is a species, and then there's a gap. This concept is a human-derived concept that does not really play out in nature at all, okay? Speciation is real, obviously. There's multiple species, right? Evolution has favored different traits in different lines of animals all across the world, different environments and whatever, right? But speciation is a spectrum, okay? It is not exact separations between distinct groups of animals like we like to think of it, okay? Now, people get angry about hybrids for a couple of reasons. One, the idea that the offspring are suffering in some way. It kind of goes back to that whole idea of, is it just unethical because their quality of life has gone down? Maybe the hybrid is sterile, and they think that that's not right to be producing an animal that is sterile. That's unnatural. Maybe the hybrid has health problems that are inherent to that hybridization. Something like a tigon or a liger. This is sometimes the case, all right? As cool as they look, you know, this gigantic big cat, there are a lot of health problems that tigers don't have and lions don't have, but when you breed them together, you get some health problems, okay? And so that could be unethical. I think that kind of is unethical. In the reptile world, one of the concerns that comes from a good place in people's hearts, but that I do not feel is scientifically sound. Oh boy, I'm just gonna say it. It's gonna make people mad. People think that hybrids are harmful to conservation practices and goals. Okay. Well, I don't agree. Okay. My degree was in wildlife conservation. I am all about conservation. I love it. Okay? But to me, as weird as this sounds, hybrids, their overall impact on conservation is probably positive. Okay? So the idea here that people have is, well, your hybrid is useless for conservation. I'm going to use tree monitors as an example. One, because we have tree monitors. Two, because they've been hybridized before, the different species of tree monitors. And three, there are some people who are absolutely enraged that this has happened and that this continues to happen. They think that you must be an idiot if you think it's okay to hybridize different species of tree monitors. You know, a green tree monitor to a black tree monitor, or a blue tree monitor to a yellow, whatever the case may be. They think that because these are rare animals, one in captivity and two, even in the wild, they're rare. You know, they're from very small geographical locations. There's a lot of habitat destruction, human encroachment. Their populations are at risk, a lot of them, as far as we can tell. They think, oh, we should be preserving all the pure blue tree monitors and all the pure green tree monitors so that we can put them back into the wild if they ever go extinct or something. Well, that's just not how it works. Again, your heart's in the right place, but that is not how it works. These captive animals are absolutely useless for reintroduction projects, okay? That sounds harsh, but it is absolutely true. It takes a berserk amount of work to reintroduce captive animals into the wild. Reptiles are no exception. There is a non-governmental organization called the Orion Society. I've mentioned them before. They do reintroductions alongside the state's agencies where they are from of eastern indigo snakes. Okay, the project is intensely expensive. The amount of scientific research and careful practices are just intense to make this work. They basically have to do the opposite of what us breeders are trying to do. They want their animals to be as wild and as not used to humans as possible, okay? Whereas our captive bred tree monitors, we are now breeding third and fourth and fifth generations, not me personally, but the hobby, of captive bred tree monitors that they'll now come to your hand for food. They'll crawl out. You can put a harness on them and take them outside. They're tongue feeding from you. You'll open the cage and they jump to your shirt. They're a pet. They love people. We're training them and breeding them to be not like a wild tree monitor at all. Okay? They are no good for reintroductions for conservation purposes. What's more, generally speaking, no breeder has the meticulous record keeping that would be required both for the heredity, the lineages of their animals, but also just everything, every single ounce they ever gain of weight, everything they've ever eaten, every single physical thing that ever happens to that animal needs to be logged if you want to scientifically approach this as a reintroduction effort. We don't do that. We're pretty careful. We log our feedings, we log some weights, and some people log sheds and even bowel movements, but it's just not the same degree as a organization full of scientists measuring and recording every speck of data imaginable so that they know everything they can before this reintroduction happens, okay? So I'm sorry, but your captive animals are just no good for reintroduction. They're never going to help conservation in that way. So if that's the case, then all people have to fall back on in order to hate on hybridization is it's unnatural. It's not right. That's not how it was intended to be. But that's just an opinion. That's not scientific. Hybrids happen in nature all the time. I don't know of anyone who has found a hybrid in tree monitors, but I could pull up a list on Google of dozens of naturally occurring hybrids in fish, in insects, in birds, in mammals, in reptiles, in amphibians. It's constant. So it is natural. And certainly the way we're keeping our animals in captivity isn't natural. So if you're against hybridization simply because it's not natural, you should be against keeping your reptiles at all. There's no logic there to me. In fact, captive breeding of reptiles after a certain time has passed is actually very, very, very good for conservation, but not for reintroduction purposes. Rather, for removing pressure from wild populations, okay? The more we breed ball pythons, the fewer will need to be snatched out of the wild. That is unequivocally a good thing. The more we breed tree monitors, the fewer of them are going to come into the country as wild-caught animals. We should be ecstatic if we produce a hybrid that draws a ton of interest. And people want these captive bred animals now. They're seeing pictures of it on whatever social media they follow. And driving up interest in these captive bred animals is good for conservation. If that's really your big push, that's what you want to be promoting, then you should be happy when so many people are like, oh my gosh, I saw this cool, we keep sailfin dragons. People have hybrids and tribrids between the Webers, the Amboinensis, and the Pustulatus, and they're gorgeous. And they don't seem to draw quite as much hate as the tree monitor hybrids. But regardless, they draw up a lot of interest. People see the hybrids and they're like, oh my gosh, how do I get one of those? And they're not asking, oh, I want a cheap import that's only $100. They're not asking for that. They're willing to pay $7, $8, $9, $1,000 for these hybrids, and that means that's one more animal that did not get pulled out of the wild. That is so good. We need that. So if your argument against hybrids is just it's unethical because it's unnatural or it's bad for conservation or it's bad for their health, I'm just not with you there. If we have a hybrid pairing that does come with health problems, of course I'm against that. But in reptiles, we just haven't found that very much. Outcrossing generally is good for the health of the offspring. Anyway, so this video has gotten long. I've covered a lot of topics, but all of these things, especially if you're getting into breeding, they're going to be thrown at you, and you're going to be like, whoa, I didn't think that I was doing anything, wrong or immoral. I'm sorry. Well, I'm here to tell you most of these things, at least in my opinion, are not wrong or immoral, okay? And I have what I feel are pretty good reasons for thinking so. And, if I ever do hybridize my tree monitors, I'm going to have to think real hard about it. Not because I think it's wrong, but because I'm going to take serious flack from a certain segment for doing so. And if I decide it's worth it to do it anyways, and they can just whine about it, then maybe I will. But unfortunately, people have formed opinions before they've actually observed the science and learned enough about it. And, I guess people are free to disagree with me, but I wish that they would just allow me to do my thing if they feel like they disagree with me. But anyways, that's not how it works on the internet, unfortunately. I hope that I said something in this vlog that was informational to somebody out there. We're always trying to teach and learn. One of my most surprising things that I've liked about this YouTube channel, people will comment about something we talked about, and they'll be like, oh, you didn't mention this when you were talking about, whatever species or whatever husbandry thing. And I'm like, I didn't even know that. So then I look it up, and sure enough, they're right. So the comments and the feedback from our social media has been extremely useful to us. So please don't feel like we'll be insulted if you point out something that I said wrong, or maybe just something that I didn't bring up. We love it. And I'm not talking about, scream at me and be rude, but if you think that there's something that I should have said that I didn't, in fact, there's going to be a video coming soon. Somebody pointed out on one of our sailfin videos that we didn't discuss quite properly something in the nutrition, or we just didn't cover it fully enough. So we're going to do a second sailfin husbandry video to try and address that, because he was right. It was a hole in our video. So anyway, that is all for now. Thank you guys so much for watching. At least got to admire a big giant ball python. And until next time, we're the Reptile Barn.